Okay, so I wanted to be as thorough as I could be. I have a feeling I might need to make another video to reply to the other comment that you left. So, is it true that it is harder to get into a school if you are competing for a major that is difficult or has like a lot of other students who are competitive? Yes. However, I'm really surprised that your school counselor told you just to go in completely undecided. Because number one, it's really difficult to establish a narrative around your college application unless you have like clear goals. So, like, technically, yes, you're no longer competing with any STEM kids, but you're now competing just with everyone in making your application stand out to top schools. Also, if you want to go into a certain field and that major happens to be closed at the university that you're attending and you went in undecided, you won't be able to transfer into that major. An example that I use for this all the time is UMich. So, if you don't know, the College of Literature, Science, and the Arts at UMich, you don't really go in with a major. You might mention the field that you're interested in on the application, but you don't declare the major before you go in. Unless, of course, you want to go into computer science. So everyone else declares their major at like the end of their sophomore year at UMich, but you need to be pre-approved to get into the computer science major at UMich. Sorry, not LSA. Computer science is in computer science and engineering. They're CSE. But you get the idea. In a lot of cases, like, there are certain majors that because they are so competitive, it's really hard to actually get into that major. And similarly, like, colleges know the game. They're not just going to let you transfer, even if you do really well your first couple of semesters. Again, that being said, I really usually agree with school counselors and the recommendations that they'll make for students. It's pretty rare that I disagree with them. So, for example, recently, a student of mine told me that her school counselor said not to take AP macro and micro in her sophomore year because it's a really difficult class, that she should just wait to take it. But I kind of told her, like, you might just have to suck up the hard class and just like preview the material, during the summer and try to get that AP on there and just try to get an A. I know that sounds like I'm telling you to like be Hercules here, but like that is, if you want to get into a top school, that's probably what you're gonna have to do. For context, she's considering going into like political science, international relations. So that being said, I'm just wondering about potential missing context that I might have in your situation. If you did bad in chemistry or you're currently struggling in chemistry, maybe your counselor doesn't think that you will be able to take like AP physics the summer after sophomore year to get it out of the way. That way you can take AP Chem, or maybe they don't think you'll do well in AP Chem. And if that's the case, it might look like you are then competing with a bunch of chemistry, like people who want to go into chemistry who did do all of that stuff. However, chemistry as a major is really interesting because like most pre-med students want to do biology, not because one is better than the other, because chemistry is really hard. I don't know if this is still the case, but I remember hearing that like chemistry across the board always had the lowest average GPA for any major. I think now it's probably engineering though. I could be wrong. But like organic chemistry is typically what like cracks pre-med students. They're like, I don't want to do this anymore, and all of them have to take it. So if pre-med is your goal, I feel like not enough students know this. You don't actually have to go in with any specific major in STEM. You can go in as like an anthropology major. My old ophthalmologist majored in like French literature or something. And shockingly, this actually doesn't make it harder to get into med school. I used to like focus a lot on like med school consulting. Specifically it was BSMD, but like I did work with a couple med students, a couple of pre-med students. And what I found was that like you have to take those prereqs anyway. Taking a humanities actually made the pre-med students that I did work with way, way better at responding to med school prompts, responding in interviews, having more compassion, having this like social understanding of the world. And that is what med schools are looking for. They're looking for compassionate physicians. So if you're only going into chem because you want to do pre-med, and that's the only reason that you think it'll be like the best thing to do for pre-med, you can just choose another major. However, if chemistry is something that you're choosing because you really like it, I say go for it. And rather than going in undecided and worrying that you're going to have to compete. Basically, like, make yourself the best candidate for that pool. Like, I think ways that you could do this right now would be to try to get some summer research. I have videos early on in our channel about doing this, but essentially you would be either applying for summer research programs. A lot of the deadlines passed, so at this point I would actually recommend reaching out to professors and seeing if they would mentor you if you don't already have like a summer program in mind. And for pre-med, if you're even thinking about BSMD programs, which I really recommend you do, look into some students and their profiles on how they got into those programs, because I think if you can match them even a little bit, even if you don't get into a BSMD program, you will likely get into a really good school. The student that I had in the past who got into Georgetown, but then turned it down for Temple University because Temple gave her a full ride. She was initially trying to get into Temple's BSMD program. It's a really competitive program, so she didn't make it. I do believe she got an interview invite from them, but all of that is to say that if you can make it so that you don't have to pay for undergrad like that student, and you can be competitive, and maybe you're not going to like an Ivy, I would recommend it. If the end goal is doctor, I feel like how much money you make after undergrad doesn't really matter because you're already planning on going into med school, and that's expensive. Something that I recommend all the time to my students is if you know you want to become a doctor, that is what you want to do, I say go to a really competitive liberal arts college, and they have really good track records with getting kids into med school. Like Amherst College, I know it's got like a 7% acceptance rate, but I feel like I can never convince a pre-med student that I've worked with to ED there. And they've got like a 32% ED rate. Sorry, I'm getting off track. The point that I was trying to make is don't go in undecided. If you're worried about chemistry and not being competitive, go in with some kind of major. And what you should be doing in high school right now is making sure that your application makes a lot of sense for the major that you are choosing. A lot of times I've seen students who will select, especially pre-med students, like an unconventional major because they think it'll make it easier to get into school. And in some cases, yes, but only if your application matches that. Because if it doesn't, the college is going to see right through it. So if you are going to take my advice and instead go in with like a humanities major and just be pre-med track, make sure that you're doing things for that major right now. So for example, if you're thinking like, oh, I want to do medical anthropology, start making sure you take like anthropology courses, maybe try dual enrollment courses, just take college classes at like a local community college. Over the summer, try to work with like medical anthropology professors. Do a lot that demonstrates to the school that like you're not lying, essentially. Because everything else on your application is like chem, and you're going in like either undecided or you're going in, with a major that does not match it at all. They're gonna see what you're doing. They're gonna be like, oh, this is a student from a STEM magnet school, right, who is trying to just get into our school through an easier major. Whenever people ask me like, what do top colleges even want? They don't want well-rounded students. They want a well-rounded class. They want somebody who is the best at what they do. And that is true that if you're going in for chem, that you are competing with other people who are the best at chem. But the trick is to not just be the best at chem, to be the best at chem with like a niche within the field. You want something that's like very, very specific in that field that like you are the best at. And a lot of the times that comes down to creativity and how can you creatively, create a narrative around why your identity and this field matters. And identity can mean a lot of different things. It can mean where you're from, where your family's from. It can mean something more personal to you. But that is what I would say you should do instead. At least go in with some major and make sure that the narrative on your college application makes sense with it.